And I think we can wrestle with God, and I honestly think we should wrestle with God. I don't think God is about our passivity or our apathy or, well, you know, endure whatever, just kind of roll over and play dead. I don't believe that God wired us that way. In fact, I think it's important because I think it helps us know who God is better. And I think when we wrestle with God, God can shape and sculpt us. And so some of that raw, honest conversation with God or struggles with God, I don't think that's all bad. And I want us to look for a couple minutes at Jacob, because Jacob is in my opinion, the quintessential wrestler. We read about him in Genesis 32, and we see that he wrestles with God. And there's an actual physical wrestling match before he crosses Jordan River, and he wrestles with an angel from God or God. But I would propose to you that Jacob wrestled with God, obviously physically in that moment at that time, but I would say that Jacob kind of was hardwired to wrestle. And this is why I say that. If you go back in Jacob's life and you look at the very beginning of his life, he's in Rebekah's womb with his brother Esau. Jacob and Esau are in there together. And Rebekah's like, hey, what's happening in here? Because there's a whole lot of tossle, turn, a lot of upheaval going on inside. And God speaks to her and says, there's two nations in your womb, and the younger will be over the older son. And so you get this idea that there's this back and forth wrestling in Rebekah's womb. And when Jacob comes out, he's holding on to Esau's heel. And that's why they gave him a name, supplanter, heel holder, and it also means a deceiver, Jacob. So he's holding on. So you see he's in the womb, he's wrestling. As he's being born, he's wrestling. And then you see this wrestling throughout his beginning of his childhood. He wrestles with Esau, his brother, to get the birthright and to get the blessing. He wrestles with his dad. His dad Isaac likes Esau better than Jacob because Esau is a man of the field, a hunter-gatherer, a manly man. Whereas Jacob, he likes to hang out by the tents and do the cooking thing. So Isaac likes the oldest son, Esau, better than Jacob. So there's a wrestle there. He's less than. He's trying to earn. And so he wrestles with, in some respects, with his dad to get the blessing. When it should have been Esau getting the blessing, he's being manipulative and coy to get the blessing from his dad. And then he runs away and he wrestles again. He wrestles with Laban, who is his kind of... he met his match, because Laban tricks him and says, well, yeah, work for me for 7 years and I'll give you my gorgeous daughter, Rachel. And that's not what plays out. Jacob works for 7 years, and he winds up marrying Leah because Jacob tricked him. So there's this wrestle again. So you see, and I would propose to you that Jacob, from his birth, from the womb, he was continually wrestling. And by the time he finishes working for Laban, that's his uncle, and he's going to move into the promised land, he tells Laban, look, I worked for you for 20 years and you changed my wages 10 times. If God hadn't been for me, I would have walked away completely empty-handed, poor, and a pauper. But God looked out for me. And so you see this kind of, I'm back and forth and I'm struggling and I'm wrestling and I'm having a back and forth to get more, to get ahead. And I think it's interesting because sometimes I think we should work this out also in our souls with God, because there's an identity that Jacob has. His parents gave him the name Jacob based on how he was born. But I want to propose to you that God gave him the name Israel. And Israel, and we read about this in Genesis 32, this is where Jacob wrestles with God. And it's an all-night wrestling match. And at one point, God dislocates his hip. And Jacob just doesn't let go. He's like, okay, well, obviously I can't overpower you, but I can at least hold on for dear life and not let you go. And finally, God says to him, the angel says to him, let me go. And he's like, I'm not letting you go until you bless me. And then the angel says, what's your name? My name is Jacob. He says, you're no longer Jacob, you are Israel, which means one who wrestles with God and man and overcomes. And I would propose to you that in reality, this was Jacob's true, authentic identity, because this is what he's been doing his entire life. And I think sometimes there's stuff that God puts inside of us. It says in Psalms 139 that you and we are fearfully and wonderfully made. God puts things inside of us, identities, blueprints, design. DNA, divine DNA. And maybe sometimes as we go through our lives, we wrestle with that. You know, I don't want to be this, I do want to be this, I don't like that, you know. And sometimes it's hard for us to come to terms with that. And I think maybe Jacob wrestled with that, struggled with that. Hey, I'm always wrestling, I'm always struggling. But when he finally came to terms and God said, your name is, this is who you are. From that point on, we don't see him wrestle again.